Cineverm.
Hello, and welcome to Cineverm, a podcast discussing films in and out of the cinema. My name is Anthony Renteria, and today I'm joined by David.
Hello.
And this week we are discussing the 1974 film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper, and it stars Marilyn Burns, Alan Danziger, Paul A. Partain, William Vale, and Terry McMinn. And here is the synopsis. 5 friends head out to rural Texas to visit the grave of a grandfather. On the way, they stumble across what appears to be a deserted house, only to discover something sinister within, something armed with a chainsaw. As always, we will begin with the spoiler-free review, and then after our ratings, we will dive into a full spoiler discussion. All right, so I guess I'll start because I am the noted horror... What is the opposite of an apologist? I guess the hater. I guess I'm the horror hater.
Yeah, just a hater.
This movie really took me off guard. I knew it was a scrappy, indie film. I understand, and maybe you have more historical context so you can actually fill me in, because I don't really know much about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film or the behind the scenes of it. I know of its cultural impact. Specifically, a lot of people that I've met in Alabama absolutely love this film. It is a film that I've always heard in groups and corners. Maybe it's just the people I've been around when I was in the filmmaking scene, but this was considered amongst many a testament to filmmaking. So there was a lot of hype built in for me, and I guess I'll just say I was very, very, very disappointed. I was
Oh my God.
I was not expecting, I don't know, maybe my mindset was off, but I was not expecting the level of camp that was here. I was honestly expecting more like Blair Witch, where it feels like non-actors, but it feels more real and authentic. There's something about the performances in this movie and the dialogue and the writing and just the whole narrative structure of it all felt very, very... I get it's indie, I get it's amateur, I get they didn't have any money probably, and, these are a bunch of people just making it for the love of filmmaking, which I can see and feel and I appreciate, but I don't know, it feels very, very, I guess, scrappy, and not in a good way. It feels very fake and scrappy. I can feel them doing certain things because it's cool versus it meaning anything, and maybe that's just my, bias, and maybe that's why I don't really like horror, because a lot of horror feels like it's made to challenge in a horror kind of sense, look at all the cool shit we can do with no money, or look at how we can do or execute this idea or visual motif to make someone disgusted or to make someone feel some sort of negative feeling. But I feel like a lot of these films that we've seen lately lack in subject matter. What is the actual, what are you trying to say with this? What are the characters about? Are they even real? Is the story even tangible or real? Is there a message or a meaning? And maybe that's me wanting too much from a film, and I just think there's a lot of elements that we'll get into in the spoilers that I think they could have really pushed into, because there is a couple elements of this in this movie. I was like, oh, this is really fucking cool. This is really interesting. I've never seen this in a horror movie, and this is, one of the greats. So I had imagined so many people would have ripped this off, but there's a cool character in here. Which this isn't a spoiler because it's one of the main characters, but he's bound by a wheelchair. And I just thought that was just a striking idea that I don't really see in horror films, where you have characters with any sort of disability or, restriction of movement or anything of the sort. And I love how that character is in this film. I'll save the rest for the spoilers. So that's my general impressions. I guess what is your history with this movie, and what was your experience on this rewatch?
I don't remember when I first saw this movie, but I just remember, and still has to me, really a strong effect. I think I just really like how I like movies that are minimalist, that make a lot out of very little, and I like movies that are just straight to the point and also have just a visual flair to them, which I feel like this one does. And yeah, I just remember, this movie makes you, well, maybe it didn't to you though. I'm trying to, just for my personal, it makes me feel it. like either I'm laughing a lot because this movie was really it's very funny to me this time around,
Yeah.
or I'm just like, there are a few sequences in this movie where I'm just like transfixed by the movie, just the effect that the sensory effect that's having on me. So I think I like admire it for that, because like you said, it's very very low budget. I think it's like $140,000 is what this movie cost.
Wow.
So yeah,
Damn.
pretty low budget, and all new actors, like you pointed out. And yeah, it's corny. So the acting isn't excellent. I mean, it isn't horrible, especially the main actress. I would say it's pretty good in parts. And I really like some of the actors. I really like the dad character, I guess, in the family of in Leatherface's family. Like he is just perfect casting, like hilarious, like something about his oh, and the brother, I guess the younger brother character. I guess he's older brother of Leatherface. I don't know. But yeah, just great, just picking these great faces like for this movie that just are like fascinating. I don't know, these actors were really good. Not the main characters, but the villains. I would say all of them are hilarious. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I don't know. It's just the effect this movie has on me. I like the cinematography. I like all the unique things that people point out about the movie. Just how it uses daytime for horror, and it kind of created that. And then obviously, I guess I'm from a historical context. Like it's pretty incredible just to think that this is before every single slasher movie, basically. You know, like it's before Halloween, before Friday the 13th.
Really?
Before Nightmare on Elm Street, before anything except for the only slasher movies I could think of that came before this were Psycho, it was 1960. And then there's another one that came out in 1960 called Peeping Tom that I remember seeing randomly. I don't know how I found it. I guess it's sort of well known, but it's kind of a serial killer movie, and it's from 1960 as well. So it's like, besides those two, I can't really think of any until the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then Halloween came out in 78, I think. And then Friday the 13th, and then obviously the 80s was like the decade of slashers. But it's just so cool that this is like an outlier. It's like a really early outlier. And then what's also weird about it is that like no sequels were made for it until like 1986 was Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Whereas, like the Halloween and the Friday the 13th movies like just churned out sequels. Like I think it's weird that this one just came out and then there was like it was well received. Well, it got mixed reviews, but like it made a lot of money for how much it cost. Yeah. So it's like, it's weird that the slasher genre didn't start earlier, that it like took longer to happen, which is interesting. So I don't know. I just think all that historical stuff is kind of cool. But yeah, I guess as we go through it, I'll talk about more of the things I admire about it.
Yeah, that is such a fascinating point that you bring up, that this is one of the earliest slasher films that really, cemented the structure of it. Because I was feeling like, okay, this is like your typical slasher thing going on. But I didn't have the context that it was, one of the original. So that actually sets a lot of things in my mind. It makes it make sense. I will say, like, again, I will say the film has this weird effect of getting better as it continues. Like the first 10, 15 minutes, I was like, this is not what I want. And then as it progresses, I mean, there are some, kind of ridiculous things that, you said you like kind of laughed. There was moments where I was laughing, but it was like the film was finding its stride and its tone. And I really loved that element. Like once we kick into the main event of this film, like the film just becomes this other like raw kind of grungy punky, like I don't know, it just has this cool attitude that I started noticing. Like the way it was edited changed, the shot compositions changed. So I don't know, like it felt like this director, I don't know if he's made other films or if this was his first film or if he's made films after this, but it feels like he knew he wanted to make this slasher thing with this Leatherface character, and all that stuff was just perfect and glorious. The setup, the costumes, the set designs, the locations, all the compositions and framings, and the lighting that has to do with any gore, bones or skin or whatever. Like all that stuff was phenomenal. But then it was all the weird like interpersonal like relationship kind of stuff that really like threw me off. Like, wait, what is going on? And like things people would say outside of the Leatherface family, like this group of friends. didn't really make sense to me at any point. But yeah, it was. I did enjoy how it kind of kept losing. Like it felt like it was like the movie was losing its mind towards the end. Like one sequence in specific. One sequence in specific last night when I was watching it. There's like a freak out moment, and I was like, oh, this is fucking weird. And it was just like extreme close up of eyeballs and stuff.
Yes.
And then you get that for like a minute or two, and then another thing happens, and then we go back to it, and in my mind I'm like, shit, am I having deja vu? Like, did I just experience this? And it was like this cool effect that the movie was making me feel a little bit psychotic. So I imagine like watching this in a theater, like on day one.
Yeah.
That must have been a surreal experience for anyone who got that opportunity.
Yeah. Oh man, I would have loved to. I just read today that it premiered in Austin, and I lived in Austin very briefly, and I'm like, yeah, this movie feels very Texas. Like something about it. It's really Texas. I mean, the accents obviously, and like the color palette of it, like just all everything's yellow and orange because it's all. That's another thing I really love just in general about the movie is like the color palette basically, like, and the times of day that they filmed it's all like during, most of it's during like the magic hour, like sunrise, sunset, and there's lots of sun flare, lens flare and stuff like that, that I really like. So yeah, it's got a unique feel. And I agree with you. It's, as the movie goes on, it feels like it feels like you're going crazy. Like you're getting immersed. And I noticed this time around how there's a point in the movie where the perspective just completely switches, and we're in the crazy people's world, like from their perspective. And I really love that. And it makes you feel it. Yeah. That you're just like, that's most of my laughing in the film was that, where you're just like, what is going on? But it makes you feel a little bit crazy.
I almost wish, like, when that, I guess I'll save this for the spoilers. I'll save it for spoilers. But
also, I guess I'll say too, like the 70s, like the time it was made. Also, when I think of the 70s in my head, just the feeling of what would it feel like to live in the 70s, I think about this movie, even though I have no idea what it actually felt like. But I did read that the director tried to, like, there were a lot of things that he was trying to capture in the movie, how, like, based on news reports that things on the news that he was seeing, kind of like the grisly nature. Like, the 70s were kind of a crazy decade in America. Like crime was up, and inflation, and like, the Vietnam War ending, and all this crazy stuff. Yeah. Like, so I feel like it really reflects that in the movie, with all the newscasts in the background, just talking about all this horrible, horrible stuff going on, horrible crimes. And it just I love the intro to this movie, how it uses that. And makes it also the fact that the opening crawl pretends that this is real events that actually happened. Like, he did that intentionally, because something about, like, he has some quote about feeling like the news and the government, there was this feeling of paranoia, like you couldn't really believe anything you saw, in the news or what the government was telling you. So it has that, like, paranoia in it. And also something else a lot of people have talked about is like the veganism or vegetarianism aspect of this movie. It's kind of it's a cool, really, like, a subtext that I don't think I've seen in any other horror movie. So that's cool too. It has just a lot of unique aspects to it that I'm surprised that there haven't been more ripoffs of it. But I can't really think of many that have done it. We talk about Midsommar being like daytime horror, but I can't think of a lot of others that have done that.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I'm no expert, but yeah, I can't off the top of my head think of any others either. I was going to say the one thing that you mentioned about the visuals. Yeah, I love the fact that it was shot on film, obviously from the 1970s. And it just, like,
16
every
millimeter.
time and this is when I say I love film, it's 16 millimeter. It's not 35, it's not 65, it's not 70, it's not IMAX. It's specifically this look. Like, if I could make every single film, slap it on a 16 film, just reformat it or whatever the hell, put every film through this, like, filter, I would. Yeah. And it just makes it feel so real. Like, it almost makes it feel like a documentary or something. I don't know what it is about the texture of 16 mil that just is so perfect. And then one thing that I really loved in this film, like, I don't know if 16 mil, like, the film actual, like, stock has changed over the years in comparison, but, like, this one was very, like, ragged and rugged. I don't know if they just got, like, a higher ISO go stock or something, but I loved how grainy certain sequences are, especially the nighttime sequences, because, you know, you need a lot of light to, you know, light film. It's not like a digital camera where you can just like bump things up and shoot in the middle of the night. And I love how there's night sequences here that are just pitch black, you know, with maybe a little light source. And it makes it feel so authentic and real. And I've never seen anyone do that. Even with digital cameras, I haven't seen anyone have the courage or tenacity to shoot something that's essentially a black screen with maybe little figures walking along. So I imagine watching that in a theater would have been absolutely freaky and horrifying, you know, to just be in darkness. So I love that about this film. And I don't know if that was like an actual choice or just we can't light and we have to have this sequence where they're walking in the middle of the night. But yeah, still loved it. So yeah, I was going to ask you, did you have any other major points before I ask you about your rating?
The only other thing I had mentioned is like just the violence. I just love the bluntness of it, of the violence compared to other slasher movies, obviously, where they just try to draw it out, and that's the thing. But like, yeah, the actual violence in the movie is pretty minimal, and it's all really, really brutal and quick and blunt. And I really love that because it just catches you off guard. It's like, you know, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, the pace of the movie, it's like, whoa, like, okay, that was quick. And you're like, okay, where is this going to go next? So that was cool. Really cool style.
I kind of found that a little off-putting because I wasn't expecting it. Like, I'm used to slashers. They really drag things out. And this one was just like, boop, it's done. And I was like, oh, so this movie's going to end now? Because everything's already happened now.
Right. But, I like that. It's like, how is this going to continue?
So what would you rate the Texas Chainsaw Massacre out of 10?
I had it as a 9 out of 10, and I don't know how to decide this. It's really hard because I forgot to look at my rating system to figure out, because I was thinking I had it at an 8. Oh man, I don't know. I probably would have to move it up to a 9 just because of its, it stays a 9 just because of its like historical significance and like the effect that it had on horror movies on such a low budget and all that, and the filmmaking. Yeah, I'll keep it at a 9.
Well, I think, oh gosh, I think I'm gonna be way lower.
Yeah.
Dude, if any of the people I mentioned that love this movie hear this, they're gonna be screaming and canceling this podcast and me. But I think for me, and this is just personal bias, I think it's very thin, character-wise, message, meaning, emotionally. Sure. But I appreciate the aesthetic, the look of the film. The sound design is something we didn't really mention, and I thought it did that very well. And the costumes, the sets, I mean, everything they squeezed out of this budget. And like the things that I have a problem with, I feel like they could have fixed because it wouldn't have costed money. Like, I think all these actors, even the main group, they all have interesting characteristics and features and faces and bodies that I think could have been used. And there's moments where all these characters emote really real emotions, but then there's like surrounding dialogue or little mini narratives or whatever between them that makes it feel fake, but all the actual like reactions feel real. So I think honestly, like, my greatest displeasure is kind of the director, like how he directed these actors. I guess how he and the writer composed this narrative. Like, I feel like it's way more concerned. Well, it's not way more concerned, but it feels way more developed in the Leatherface side of the narrative. And then everything else just feels like a means to get to the Leatherface stuff. But with it being such a short film, I kind of wish it would have just switched perspectives and it would have been just entirely about the Leatherface people and family in that circumstance, and had these characters as just like invaders or something, because that was the central thing of interest that I think this film pulls off well. But there are beautiful and amazing compositions towards the end, which we'll get to in the spoilers. But there are moments of this film that I think are truly 9 out of 10, just like beautiful moments of just like how you said, just extreme bluntness, just like a razor sharp knife of, all right, that's it. And then it cuts to the next thing. So with all that being said, I think I am going to I was going to give it like a 4 out of 10. I think that is way too harsh. So
that's what I was going to guess.
You bumped me up. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 because I would give, I would give every slasher I've ever seen like a 2 out of 10. So in the slasher genre, this is very unique. And like just now knowing since you educated me about this being one of the earlies slasher films, like, yeah, this is like one of the greats in my perspective, even though I'm still giving it a 6. But for what it's doing, it's very technically savvy. And with no money and, just such a brutal, garage level expression of it that is really cool. So I guess I was going to ask you, if anyone hasn't seen this movie, who would you recommend this to?
I think any fan of horror that has not seen this movie for some reason, I definitely should see it. 70s, just people who like, low budget horror or just like 70s kind of aesthetic movies that haven't seen this one yet. Yeah. But it's so well known. Yeah. I don't know. Anyone who likes a good horror movie, likes a good, like, intense, short to the point, intense movie.
And then one last thing before we wrap this review portion. Have you seen any of the sequels, the remakes?
Oh, yeah.
Have any of those held up or of importance?
Yeah. No. That's what's weird is that they have, well, I said that earlier, but yeah, he didn't make a sequel until like a long time later. And I've only seen scenes of it, and it looks very, he did the total opposite tone to where it's like really silly and campy and like comedic on purpose. And then, and then I think, obviously there's remakes and stuff. I haven't seen any of those. Don't care to see them because it's like, what's the point? Yeah. But then this director, I mean, what's weird about him is like he's so well known for like this movie, and then he directed Poltergeist, the Steven Spielberg like produced horror movie, and then a bunch of other ones that like fans of his like, but that never really got any kind of commercial success. So it's sort of weird. He's a weird director where it was just like a what do you call it? Flash in the pan, like just this movie. Man. Like he was right at the forefront of this genre that was like not even invented yet. He was like tapped into the zeitgeist, and he did it. Which I feel like it's one of those where if you make one movie like this, like that's all you need to make, Yeah. Things I didn't mention earlier, like this is the first movie where you have this like big lumbering killer that's wearing a mask. Like the idea of like the killer wearing a mask. Like I was reading that, I was like, what? Yeah, I can't think of any that are before then that do that. But isn't that weird that wasn't invented until then? And then obviously Halloween took that idea from this. It's weird, certain things like that, or like the idea of the last girl, or just the slasher in general, like a movie where the main plot is a bunch of people get killed. Like that's not really like Psycho. I think 2 people get killed, and that's it. But it's weird that before that nobody had thought about that that could be a really entertaining genre that people would watch, is just people getting killed, one after another.
Well, we're going to finish off this review portion of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we will be going into the spoiler discussion now. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you can pause the podcast now. And while you do that, don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, comment on what you thought about the film or our takes on it. You can follow us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or email us at cineverm@yahoo.com. And you can visit our website, cineverm.com, for our canon lists and written reviews. And then also check out my YouTube channel, A Lonely Critic, where I do solo reviews. And if you're into video game news, check out my podcast, Headset Chat. And then also check out my new podcast, my new book podcast, Read, Drink, Talk, where me and my friend drink some drinks and read some books. And we're currently reading through the Red Rising series, and it's been a lot of fun. So go check that out. But now let's get into the spoilers of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What was your main thing that you didn't like about it, I guess? The character stuff, I guess, that you would improve about this movie.
Yeah, just all...
And I'll try to defend it.
Yeah, like all the character dynamics from the get-go, I was like, oh, this is not... I don't know, it just didn't feel or play well. Like, it felt like a bad short film indie movie type thing. Like, it felt like someone trying to write something that was saying something, but it didn't feel like it was saying something. I don't know. It's just like this weird, ethereal, like non-explainable thing that it felt like really campy. Like it just felt like campy writing, and that made the performances feel weird. And there was a lot of like exaggerated facial expressions, or like, I don't know, maybe people acted this in the 70s, but it felt like something like, when you watch like a talkie movie from that era, you can see people hamming it up because that was the culture then, or not the culture, but that was like
the style,
the appearance of a film. Yeah, like noirs, everyone acted a certain way. This felt like what I unfortunately feel like is very unrealistic and campy and like B-movie in my eyes, bad. I know some people like that camp and B movie like aesthetic and quality, but for me,
Yeah.
I've never liked it. Like I guess I've never been into horror. I wasn't grown into it
Or-
or experienced when I was young, so I guess there's no nostalgia there for me. So I just see it as bad writing and bad performances. So like all the stuff in the van leading up, I mean, all the way to them coming into the house of Leatherface, I was just so tuned out and checked out and was like, what is this? Like even when the hitchhiker came on board, I was like, oh, this is like, it felt like it was trying like really hard. Like the performer who was the hitchhiker, I mean, he was doing great and he acted.
Oh my god, I like him. I was like, oh, this is so fun. It's fun. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to give certain genres, you just have like what is it called? Suspension of disbelief. Like you just have to be like, look, this is a slasher movie, and all slasher movies have notoriously, acting is not the focus. These characters are not that important, whoever they are, and their personalities or relationships to each other. Because I thought that's funny, is like we don't really know. It's not really clear you mentioned this, like what the relationships of all of them together are. But I kind of like that. It's just kind of it's better than a lot of movies how they cornily like throw in what is that called when they just awkwardly say each other's names or like throw in details about each other as they're talking back and forth. Yeah, like it's better than that. Like I like being a little confused about the people that I'm watching, because why would they? What was that movie that just came out, The Black Phone, where there was a scene in that where they did that, where the two characters were talking and they were just saying each other's names and saying the names of other characters and like telling us the backstory of all the other characters, and it's just like, oh my god. That's so annoying when that happens. So I like this. I like the vagueness of it.
See, I didn't want that. So I'm kind of like
just
spoiled.
The acting quality.
Yeah, because I'm when I watch a movie that's this low budget, what I think of, and like, I mean, I haven't directed a movie, but just what I think I would aim for, because you're working with non-actors, right? So I think in my perspective, you got to mold to them and their capabilities and write around them, and you got to get the essence that you want out of them. And I felt like I think the director and the writing really fit the hitchhiker. I think his performance was awesome. It just felt so fake in contrast to everyone else in the van. Like when he's doing his big freak out, everyone is like, whoa. And they're like looking around at each other, and like it was just like they didn't really know what to do. So I don't know if the director just wasn't like telling them like, hey, you need to like amp up the energy or lower, or like make it like a weird awkward silence. But it just felt so weirdly put together and cut, that whole sequence. But what I was gonna say was like I'm kind of spoiled off like Sean Baker movies and then Harmony Korine movies, where they both make no budget movies with non-actors. Like that's their whole stick, and they make them feel real, because I guess they do what I'm saying, which is like they mold the narrative around those people. Like just make them act, like tell them to act how they act. Like everyone's technically a person, so just cast someone that acts like, because like I imagine this the hitchhiker guy, I imagine he had that energy in real life, just like the dad character, and even the Leatherface person. Like I feel like they were at least close to that energy, because they all did perfect and they never broke character, and they were just consistent all the way through, and the like small mannerisms and like physical attributes that they all performed all felt real and consistent and like just authentic all the way through. Specifically like the Leatherface character. Like I was imagining, like a typical, slasher villain, but like the guy is like very jovial and playful and jolly, and and he has like his own little world that he lives in. And so I was gonna ask you about that, like how, I mean, you kind of talked about the family and the review portion, but like spoiler wise, what did you think about those three? And specifically Leatherface.
I love how he's portrayed, because the only thing that I read was that actor, he imagined I guess when he read the script or whatever, imagined that Leatherface was like, had some kind of, disability or learning disability, or like, had never learned really how to speak. He's basically a child. Like my interpretation of him, his acting, it's like a child. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like he is like a child. He talks in a really high-pitched voice, and that's interesting in itself. Like he's not trying to be scary. Like the way he talks is not scary, and he's when he's around the dad character, he's really timid and subservient. And so it made me he's really pitiful, and like it's like, oh, it makes you realize that, oh, maybe he's a victim as well. Like he's just a victim of his dad. So there's a really cool like family hereditary message there that's cool. And I read that the actor went to I don't know if this is like not politically correct nowadays, it would be frowned upon, but he went to some kind of special needs school, like to observe the students there, to like see how they acted, and so that's interesting that he even put any kind of thought into this into this slasher character, is kind of cool. And it just adds an extra, like when you notice it, you're like, oh yeah, like Leatherface is kind of like, it's kind of sad because it seems like he's just doing whatever his dad taught him and whatever granddad was, taught him. So it's kind of cool. Just adds a little extra layer that's deeper than, say, like Halloween or Friday the 13th or these other movies that came after.
Yeah, I was going to say that is like, very fine line. I could see how some people would be severely offended by this film, because like I did feel immediately like this family, and I mean this is just a fact of the time period of films. I mean, even like, I don't know when it ended, but like a lot of early horror, in my perspective, they used a lot of like mental illnesses or handicaps or disabilities as sources of horror or terror. Before then, people use like carnival people as forms of horror and terror. Just like the unknown has always horrified people. And I do see this film as like one of those films where these two, Leatherface and his brother, I imagine, are just like abused people that, honestly just need help, and then because of the father. So like if you see it from the lens of like these are just abused people, but I could see how some people would be offended, by their portrayal. And then one other thing I was going to ask about, because, every time someone brings up this movie to me, they always talk about the absolute like brutality and rawness, and there's like I felt it in the bluntness. Like we were talking, or you had mentioned, how he like kills these people. It's very blunt. But I thought every time I imagined the film, I imagined it as a very like just uncomfortable, like just angry, mad movie. And it didn't feel like that at all. Like you had kind of mentioned you were laughing, and there was many sequences where I thought they were just having like a fun time, and it kind of bled on screen. So I was kind of like taken aback, like, oh, I thought this was like raw, hardcore, like this was, the slasher movie that no one's made since, because no one has the courage to do it, to do something so insane. So I was going to ask you like about the kills specifically, what you thought about that, and did you ever like get that from the tone, or has it always been like kind of campy to you?
I guess it's always been kind of camp. I don't know. I just like how brutal and sudden the kills are, just compared to every other slash. Even Psycho, like the kills in that are very over the top and like drawn out, and sensationalized, but the kills in this are purposefully not sensationalized, and I think that's really cool. And I think it also is a little bit a part of the animal rights, whatever you want to call it, vegetarianism, like subplot or subtext of the movie, which is cool. I read supposedly Guillermo del Toro, when he first saw this movie, went vegetarian after watching this movie.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. Like it had he saw it in the movie. He saw that subtext. They talk a lot about like slaughtering cattle. There's a lot of talk about that, which is cool. So yeah, I think a little bit of that is just the message that it's trying to put across, is like these people are just like cattle just being slaughtered from the bad guy's perspective. And so it's like, that's the horror of it, is like they're no different than we're animals. Like that's part of the horror of this movie, is just seeing how, like, look how easily these people die, and that's kind of rare. And for other movies, especially before this one, it's cool to see it. It has an effect on you. But then also you have the drawn out like horror of the last girl, and that's most of the horror of the movie, I guess, is just her anticipating what's going to happen to her, and just being immersed in the insanity of these characters and the isolation. And I guess part of it's just the overall political stuff. It's like, I guess the 70s, but even nowadays, like, because honestly, I feel like this is a side topic, but I feel like nowadays we're sort of in like a second 70s. It kind of feels like how just there's this overall sort of feeling of like hopelessness, and like we can't imagine what the future's going to be like, and inflation now, and stuff like that. It has that same feeling of like, there's all these people out there in America that are so isolated, or like isolated by poverty or like a mental illness or whatever, and they're just out there. Like, that's a good thing. That's an interesting thing to explore in horror. And I feel like the edges of society, the fringes of society, I think that's a cool thing. And this movie definitely touches on that in a cool way, in a unique way. And I just watched last night. Right after I watched this, I watched The Hills Have Eyes, which I've never seen before, which the director of that, Wes Craven, another famous 70s horror director, said that it was inspired by, it was like an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it also has that feeling of like, oh, this is about, like, the villains in the movie have a certain level of like pitifulness to them. Like, you kind of pity them. Mm-hmm. And you sort of see their perspective and the fact that they're so isolated from society that they become crazy like this and like vengeful or whatever. So it's cool. It's an interesting little subgenre in horror that that I would say is lost in like the future slasher movies that I would say are lesser. Oh yeah, God, I'm sorry for ranting, but another thing I didn't mention earlier that I thought of when you're talking about the characters and their acting and like, but what's weird is that, did you ever see X that just came out this year, or was it last year?
No, it was this year. I do want to watch it because a lot of people talk about it.
It's one of those where you just see it and you're like, this movie didn't need to be made because we have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And when you see like specifically the group, it's a very similar like group of characters in a van on a road trip for a purpose, and they get diverted to a creepy house where blah, 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 slasher genre. But yeah, it's just, when I watch that movie, I'm like, ugh, because I was thinking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was watching it. I was like, these characters are they're too specifically written. Like, we learn too much about them. Each of them has a really specific kind of stereotypical personality, like sleazy personality or whatever. They all have really distinct characters and personality, but it's kind of like, it feels even faker than this version, which is kind of like maybe bad acting, but like the people just, you don't know much about them. It's kind of vague. And I don't know. I like that for some reason. I don't know. It just fits. It fits this genre because they all die within like 25 minutes. So it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of like, it's an economy of filmmaking. It's like, why worry about that? I feel like he picked the best actress to survive for the rest of the movie because she's really good at showing fear, and like that's all that matters in this genre. So I don't know.
Yeah, I do think there could be a way. Like, oh God, I just wish Harmony Korine or Sean Baker could just make a horror movie, and I think they would do like the perfect medium of, we're not going to do all this backstory, because if you think about the Florida Project or the Beach Bum or probably even the movie that you love with Harmony Korine, Gummo or Kids, whatever it is,
Gummo.
But you're just like when the movie starts, you begin. There's no flashbacks. There's no backs. You're just experiencing their lives. So it'd be so cool to get something that feels so real, like one of their films. And then there's a slasher, there's like a killer. And I mean, these people who live on the fringes, like I imagine, and like Gummo and stuff, like it wouldn't take much for someone to be like coked out or heroined out and then suddenly wants to kill these people for some sort of revenge or something. I don't know. Now I'm starting to think I want to write this thing. Like, I want to write the slasher for myself. But one thing that I did want to talk about with the kills was, now that I'm going back and reprocessing, I think I misspoke a little bit. The kills themselves are absolutely amazing, brutal, and captured beautifully. Like the first kill with the guy who walks into the house, he walks through that metal door thing and just gets hit in the head and just the whole performance, the shot design, the framing within the framing within the framing with the multiple doors leading into the house, and then, him getting bashed in the head. And then I love the physicality of the Leatherface actor and the way he slams that metal door shut.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't even let us experience anything else. And that is like one of the best scenes of the film, in my opinion.
Yep.
And like, what an introduction to a murder. And then after that, we have the female goes back into the house, and the way she is like stabbed onto that hook, it felt like borderline Saw, kind of like body horror kind of, or what is that genre called? I guess it's like
torture porn kind of.
Torture porn. Like it was on that barrier and on that line. And I mean, this is like what, 20, 30 30 years before that. And then I love the
Yeah.
framing of how he put the camera. I'm not going to describe it well, but the guy who we just saw his head bashed in, his like torso, hips, and then his legs are like dangling off center frame, capturing the whole bottom frame, and then we see her in the center top frame, just dangling and screaming, and then you see the
Yeah.
chainsaw, but you don't really see like gushing blood or anything
Nope.
crazy like that. But again, just like really cool framing compositions that I really loved. Like all the kills were just so beautifully captured. Like I could tell, the director and the cinematographer, they really had a vision for this film that I still think most slashers haven't come close to those two sequences like in my mind. But yeah, I was gonna ask you if you
Yeah.
had anything else to add to that or any of the other kills that you wanted to
Yeah,
mention.
like like shots in the movie that I remember, like the opening shot. Is it the very first thing you see? The opening shot of the skeleton posed on, or the corpse posed on in the cemetery.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
oh, I love that shot. Like, it's the colors of it. It's like this orangish red tint time of day with the corpse like just sitting on top of a cross or whatever in the cemetery. It's such a cool shot. And
yeah.
then I always remember the shot of the girl, the second girl, the hook girl that gets killed, like walking into the house, and it's like this
Hmm.
great like low angle shot, like pointing up at her, and like you just see it's like the colors like red, white, and blue. It's like her
Yeah,
red shorts, and then her back, because it's like one of those like dresses you doesn't have a
yeah,
back, and then like the blue sky with the white clouds above it, like such a perfect shot. Like that's the perfect shot of the movie to me. um
hmm,
yeah, there's so many of those that are so well. There's one near the end when she opens her eyes in the dinner scene where she focuses, I forgot what the order is, like she focuses on like an armadillo on the table, like that's the first thing she sees, and then the focus shifts behind that to like some horrible like food like skeleton on the table, and then the focus
yeah.
shifts back to grandpa, and then she starts screaming. That's such a cool way to show someone waking up, and like their eyes are kind of adjusting, and like that's the first thing they see, and their focus shifts. I thought that was a really
Yeah,
cool choice. Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
cool things like that.
Like those little techniques is what made the film, like as it progresses, you feel like you're diving into the insanity of the main character. Like those little, like it's just like interesting framings, and like how you're saying, like the focus change, the zooming. There's a couple like crash zooms that happen in this movie that were like insane, where we would just like zoom hardcore into the house or zoom hardcore out. There's some zooms into like the moon, where like the moon is like just completely blown out of focus, and then
Oh
the
yeah.
moon just sharpens intensely, and then that does the crossfade into a scene. We do the same thing with suns or like high beams. So like there's like
Hmm.
so many cool artsy indie ideas that I think this guy really pulled off in like certain sequences. One thing I wanted to talk about about the low profile shot that you loved, I also think it's beautiful. Yeah, just having like, and then that's like one of the costuming choices that I love is like the red shorts is such a like, it's like a sensual color because it was just so bright red, and then they're short shorts, and I imagine they were short shorts for even that time period, and then just the whole bare back of her just showing, like there's certain points where you see her from walking from behind and it almost looks like she's topless because the
Right.
way that shirt is cut. So it feels like a very provocative statement or image that they chose to show off. But I did notice, because I was going to bring this up, like I feel like Toby Hooper really loves butts, because there was a lot of butt shots. Like there was one shot where they were out by the gas station doing something, and the same kind of framing was replicated, and like center frame was her butt and then the other girl's butt.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, this guy.
Well, I was thinking about that, or I was wondering if it's just a thing that he just chose the low angle shots like in the movie, because
Hmm.
there's a lot of low angle shots that are not butts, but it's like the same angle. So I was like, did he just
Yeah.
is it just he chose that kind of look for a lot of things? I don't know, but yeah, I see what you're saying. Oh, and the girl having a backless top, like it's perfect for her death, because like it makes it more vulnerable, like she's
Oh
completely
yeah.
vulnerable. Like there's nothing separating her from that hook that gets embedded into her back. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. And I love how, oh man, her death, like I love how he carries her into the house. Like it's just so, he's so much bigger
Oh
than her, and it's so easy. Like the
God, yeah.
ease of the kills is hilarious. Like no
He
one no
the
one stands a chance.
the way he lifts her, God, I'm so happy you brought that up because I totally forgot. But yeah, the way he physically, like, and that's the thing, like this Leatherface guy, I didn't even read his, what is his name? Gunnar Hansen, and then the old man is Jim Sido, and then the hitchhiker is Edwin Neal. So shout out to all of them. But yeah, the way he carries that woman, oh my God, he makes her like look like a feather, and it was just
Yeah.
so. It felt so surreal, and I was actually like worried about the actress because he was just like carrying her like nothing, and then she is flailing for her
Yeah.
life. Like she is like, oh my God, she was like just millimeters away from bashing her head into the doorway
Ooh.
while they're walking in because she's just bashing up and down, and I was like, God, I would be having a panic attack if I was a director. Like, oh my God, please do not get a concussion. Or like I started worrying that she was gonna bash her head into his head, like just
Yeah.
bashing his face. And but yeah, that whole sequence just so God like that, and that is just terrifying to see a giant dude, pick someone up like nothing.
Well, that reminds me. I read that like by the end of this movie, pretty much the director was joking that pretty much every actor had some kind of injury, and lots of
Really?
them held grudges against him for like years afterwards because of he was not. I don't like, for instance, like the hammer scene at the very end, where Grandpa, they're letting Grandpa take a whack at her.
Hmm.
Um, like that's a real they didn't, I'm me in my brain, I'm thinking, well, obviously they're going to use like a fake hammer because
Oh,
they've got her head down there, they're just like dropping a hammer, very, but no, they used a real hammer
and
for
it
that
hits her.
scene.
It hits her at one
uh
point.
yeah, and then
I
the
knew I
scene.
knew that was real, man, because I was watching it and I was like, the way that's hitting that pan, like that shit has weight to
Yeah,
it. There's something. Wow.
and then also when she gets her, when they cut her finger so that Grandpa could suck on it, like they actually cut her finger, like they,
Oh.
because they tried to use, yeah, like they tried to use real, or they tried to use fake blood, but he didn't like how it looked, the
Hmm.
director. So I guess the actress agreed to it or whatever, and they just cut her finger, like it used her actual blood.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, things that would never happen in any modern movie. Definitely would never happen. But that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I do not agree with it. I would.
It's not
the,
cool. Yeah, it's not really cool that it happened, but since it did happen, I can
yeah.
I can admire it in the past tense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That is one of the things of like old filmmaking that I think wouldn't fly now. Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of that stuff with like I don't know. I just randomly was thinking about Taxi Driver, but like there's probably a lot of stuff in that movie that they probably couldn't get away with now. But yeah, that
Yeah.
is that is insane. So that makes me wonder. Do you know if like the hand cutting scene in the van with the hitchhiker was that real or was that fake?
I don't know, but
Okay,
I don't
so
know, but I that was probably fake. Yeah.
okay.
It
Well,
looks kind of fake to me, but
Well, the
I don't know.
other scenes, I guess, like, do you think she really jumped out of all these windows? Like, I'm trying to think back how
Oh
they shot
God.
that.
She jumps out of she jumps out of two windows.
Yeah,
Probably
that.
not, but I felt so bad for her character. Yeah, the second time, I was just like, "Oh my god." That reminds me of her whole ordeal. The other effect the movie has is it makes you feel really exhausted. Like it makes you feel her
Yeah.
exhaustion. There's that whole sequence at
God.
night where she's running away, and by the end
Oh,
of it, I'm just like, "Oh my god!" It's like
just.
watching uncut gems or something. Like, and you just start to feel anxious because the main character is anxious. It's like, oh, I'm so tired.
Yeah, that was so that okay, so I talked about a little bit in the review section about, the dinner sequence and like how that's shot and edited. But before we get into that, that chase sequence, because I think that happens before. Yeah, that happens before. The chase sequence through the woods, like it's so yeah, it was so drawn out. And I think there's one point where she runs one way, runs back, runs the other way. She gets captured, goes to the house, and then she's running back through it. And then I don't know. I felt like I was going crazy. Like, am I watching the same scene? Just like for some reason in my mind, I imagined like he shot like one chase sequence, right? And then I don't know. This doesn't really make sense in my brain, but it almost felt like he just flipped it backwards and like showed the same scene in reverse or something. Like
Yeah.
it made me think crazy. Like the way she was screaming and flailing felt like exactly the same like as she was running. Like it felt like she was just running in like infinity. gosh, and,
Yeah.
and yeah, like the way she flails and moving, like I felt bad. Like was kind of like screaming at her, like stop screaming so you can like breathe and you'll outrun this guy. And then her movements were so wild, but that's probably the director. Like I want this to feel insane, and it did.
Yeah.
And then I love, like I've spent some time in Texas, but I've never seen shrubbery like this in this movie. Like it felt like these giant like a thorn bush, but imagine if they were just
Yeah.
20 feet tall and just everywhere. And there's sequences where she's running through them, getting stuck, and then the chainsaw or Leatherface is behind her, cutting through them and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on?
Just like huge brambles. Yeah. Just endless,
Yeah.
an endless maze of brambles. Yeah.
God, I started to laugh. I think it's like I don't know how long the sequence is, but it felt like it was like 20 minutes long. And I just started to like laugh because I was like, what if the rest of this movie is them running in circles until like one of them blacks out or something? Gosh, it was insane. But I mean, leading up to that, we see the death of the character that's in the wheelchair. I forgot his character's name.
Franklin.
Yeah, Franklin, and he was probably the most interesting character of the four. I do agree. The woman we're talking about, I forgot her name, but she is the most emotive and probably the best performer of the lot. But his character felt like he could have been a really character to dive into a little deeper, and he felt, unfortunately, like the fakest to me. Like the way he emoted was so exaggerated. But
he was the worst actor for sure out of all of them.
Yeah, and I felt kind of bad because he was the most interesting, and he could have been the source of a lot of anxiety and emotion. But I was gonna ask you your like whole perspective of that, because when I started watching, I was like, wait, this guy's in a wheelchair. Like, like number one rule of a slasher movie is like running. And I just thought like, oh, this is going to be so amazing. Like the way he's going to play with this tension with this character. And then like, it doesn't really happen, but, and I was
he
like,
gets
oh, man.
killed so quickly, so immediately.
Yeah,
Like,
that was a bummer. But I do like, I don't know, he didn't really dig into it. Like, honestly, I kind of feel this way with even the vegetarian, like all the themes that people have labeled onto this film. I feel like he did like a surface level of planting a seed, but I don't think the director really nourished and watered any of these seeds in my personal taste. And then this character is one of those where I think like, what a genius idea to have a character, kind of dependent on these others, and then them all being, kind of douchebaggy. And we get that sequence when they enter that first abandoned house, and he's kind of frustrated with them, and he can't go up the stairs. And I was like, oh my God, this could have been like a 10 out of 10 sequence. Like give me this script, I will write this. Like the frustration of this character, like feeling left behind, feeling abandoned, and then feeling incapable because of whatever disability and the anger, frustration along with that. And I was like, oh man, this is cool. And then they kind of tackle at it again when the other two have been slaughtered, and then they're by the van, and he's not wanting to give her the flashlight because he knows if he gives her the flashlight, she's going to run off, and he's just going to be abandoned there. And there's like this, like, I don't know, I thought he could have really dug into the emotionality of it, but how it's portrayed and played in the movie is more campy, like B-movie, like almost, I don't agree with this, but it almost feels like the filmmaker was more like, this is a pathetic character, and this is kind of how he's set up, like he is, like, because no one really likes him, and the way he's being shot and composed in the film feels almost more diminishing than anything, but still just like an awesome concept. And I don't understand why, like in my slasher movie, there's going to be a wheelchair character, so. But I was going to ask you your opinion of that character and all those events and sequences. And yeah, how he got killed was disappointing. Like, it wasn't even bloody or anything. Like,
yeah, well, I was meaning to say this earlier, but I read that the director tried to get a PG rating on this movie. Like, he really tried. He was hoping or thought that was a possibility that he was going to get a PG rating.
Wow.
But yeah, obviously that did not happen. I think it was rated X, and then they cut a little bit, and then they got the R rating. But I just think that's hilarious that because he did try. It does feel almost like he tried to leave out as much blood as possible. It's like very dry, like all the kills. But yeah, like
you're
Franklin.
absolutely right.
I don't know. Like if I wrote down while I was watching it, like what's the point of Franklin's character? Because it feels like there's a point to it, but it's not made really clear. Because obviously he's really pitiful, like the way he's portrayed, and he's insecure about it. He's constantly like really insecure that they don't want him there and all this stuff, and they ignore him constantly. Obviously, pretty much they just use him because they wanted to see this old house, I guess, and he's just telling them where the watering hole used to be and stuff. And it's like the only thing I could think of is that it has to do with how the bad guys are these like on the fringes of society, like the dispossessed, the mentally ill, the disabled basically of society, and like how the main characters are killed. There's like some kind of weird justice going on, because of how cruel they are to like Franklin, and then how their reactions to the hitchhiker, even though, I mean, because the hitchhiker isn't he's not like a mean spirited person. He's just kind of crazy, in an uncomfortable way. And I thought that's cool how he's portrayed like that. It's not like he's evil. He's just messed up. And so I feel like that was the point of having Franklin's characters like show the main characters how they disrespected Franklin. And there's some kind of larger message in there about America and how America is sort of like ignoring these fringes of society and just like sensationalizing them through the news, but not really doing anything about them to help them, just kind of like looking down their nose at them. So I feel like that was the message that the director was trying to put across, but maybe it wasn't as obvious or like deep as he wanted it to be. But
totally feel like he could have dove a little deeper, and like doubled down on the bully aspect. Like I kind of wish I would have hated all the characters because of what they did or said to Franklin. Like that would have been a cool dichotomy to feel. Like I feel like you could have easily written this film to hate everyone, and then almost like Leatherface is like the least hated one. Like if you wanted to write it hard enough, I think you could have easily done that with these characters. But yeah, one thing we got to talk about is, when she finally gets captured, the final girl, she gets captured, she gets put in this house, and that's when we finally see a lot of the family aspects of this. So I was going to ask you about that, like the dinner sequence. We kind of talked about, the hammer thing and the grandpa, which that was a complete shock to me. I thought that grandpa was just a skeleton. Like when we first saw
I like that. I love that reveal. Like, that like he looks like a corpse, but he is still alive, and that's so creepy. Or like, is he a vampire? There's a lot of references to vampires in the movie. Like they reference Dracula and Bela Lugosi, and then Grandpa sucking the blood out of her finger. It's like kind of a cool little vampire. Like, how is he alive exactly? Is he a vampire? I don't know, but it's all like left vague, which makes it scarier. So yeah, I liked that, and just how also. This is another thing that X does. That new movie. Part of the horror. Like the horror of old people, which X does it a lot more, like goes into it. There's two elderly characters but it's like a mix between feeling disgust for them, but then like as the audience, we're kind of, I don't know, they do it a lot more in X. I don't know in this movie, but your natural inclination is to feel disgust for them because they're so old, old people, they're disgusting. They're old, they're ugly, they're whatever, they're useless, but also like gets revenge on us or the main characters that view them that way, for thinking that way. So I don't know. That's like a mess. I just think it's cool that aspect is even in this movie, even though it doesn't go deep into it. But it's kind of like, how like this old, disgusting old man, that's barely functioning, and like the horror of that. It's just like a really subtle horror, I guess. Like, how is he still alive? But it's a thing that pretty much everyone feels at some point with. Maybe a thing that a lot of people feel but don't say out loud about, let's say their grandparents or great-grandparents or whatever. And they're just, it's like, wow, like how are they still alive? And kind of like the mixed feelings people have about that. And so I think that's cool that is part of horror. I'm sure I'm just not thinking of better examples right now, but there's other horror movies that like explore that more. That's why the grandpa's interesting to me. Yeah, just the way they just like that in that dinner scene, just the way that they're just constantly laughing at her and making fun of her. So it's like just the noise is just non-relenting. Like it's either her screaming or they're just yelling at each other or laughing or just fighting with each other. It's just perfect. So yeah, like the pandemonium of that scene. Yeah. And I like how Leatherface, he puts on a wig, like a woman's wig and like an apron, and it's like he takes on this like mother role, because there isn't really a woman in the family besides the skeleton of grandma, I guess. So that was a weird he puts on a different mask too. He has the like feminine kind of mask with like makeup on it and lipstick. So yeah, really weird. Just a bunch of weird stuff to think about and to soak up as you're watching that scene.
And then the other element, I brought it up earlier, but yeah, the way the shots are composed during the sequence, like with the extreme close-ups of eyeballs. I absolutely
Yeah.
love that. I'm literally writing little short films where like this general visual motif is like eyeballs. And just when it like we first see her eyes just like darting left to right, I was like, "Oh my god, this is like 10 out of 10 level shit right here." And the way that's all intercut to with the sounds of everyone laughing and her screaming, it was just like
Yeah.
it was almost like anxiety overload, like you were saying. Like it was like just almost too much, and I loved that aspect of it. I was gonna say, okay, so after this dinner sequence, what happens? She we see another running scene through the woods, and then
They get distracted like fighting each other, and so she's able to run out of the window. Yeah.
okay,
And
and then
then
that's when
yeah.
she runs out to the main road, and then we finally see. Oh well, before that, before this, we see her run to the gas station that was quote
Yeah,
unquote
I
out of
wanted to talk
gas.
about that whole sequence. Yeah.
Yeah, she meets this old man who we then and during the sequence discover is I guess the father to these two people. And then the main sequence I want to talk about, like I loved how this was actually the interaction was composed of her freaking out and then him trying to calm her down, and then just the anxiety of seeing the again like the framing, like it feels like we're in her perspective the way it's shot. We're seeing like through that doorway the truck. It's like this empty night, empty landscape, and then finally the truck backs up. We get an awesome reverse shot when later on in the sequence she's like tied up with a bag over her head or whatever, and then we get a shot like it's like an opposite shot through the truck, through that truck's window, through the other window, then through the door frame, and we are seeing her come in, and then there's like movement with the camera going in and out. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
god, this is that if the whole movie would have had that kind of movement framing staging and composition, oh I would have lost my shit. Like that was truly one of the coolest sequences of the movie. What did you think about that whole scenario?
Yeah, I just love because that's the point in the movie where it switches perspective all of a sudden, or like suddenly
Mm-hmm.
you're like just in the perspective. You're just totally all the main characters are dead or like incapacitated, and so you're just traveling along with the crazy people now. And I love that. Just how
Yeah.
first you're like, is this guy? There's so many good things about that scene that add to the horror. Like, okay, like obviously this guy is kind of sleazy, but he seems sort of nice at first, and then he leaves, and he just well, first you're like wondering like where did Leatherface go? Like he just ran up to the door, chased her in, and then as soon
Yeah.
as she goes inside, he just disappears, which is like
Yeah.
what
And
happened?
turns off
Like is
his
he just
chainsaw.
yeah, like yeah, like is he just waiting outside? Like you're wondering that. And when he leaves, he just leaves the door wide open, and so you're just
Mm-hmm.
staring out the door at the openness, like okay, he's just gonna burst in any second.
Yeah.
Or you're thinking, okay, if this guy is innocent, like this guy, as soon as he goes out the door, this guy's gonna get killed. Like right when he goes through the door frame, he's gonna
Yeah.
get killed by Leatherface, but that doesn't happen. And then the little there when it's just focusing on her and she's panicking, the sound effects of the meat sizzling, gets like louder and
Yeah.
louder. Like it starts to turn up in the background. And then it shows her looking at the meat and the close-ups of the red meat in the oven. Yeah, it's just perfect. Like just adding to the tension. And then the
Mm-hmm.
car, like you said, the truck backs up, and the sound. I wonder if the sound, because what it sounded like to me was they mixed the sound of the chainsaw a little bit with the sound of the
Mm.
truck backing up to add to the fake out of like, oh, this is Leatherface, but then it's the truck. Yeah, and then just like, oh my god, and then well, yeah, once he gets her in the bag and he gets her in the truck, just the way that he's just sticking her with the broomstick. Well, first the way
Oh
that
my
he
god.
like just hits her with the broomstick, and then he's just poking her with the broomstick, like just getting sadistic pleasure out of it. I
Yeah.
love that. And it shows you the whole process. That's another thing that's cool. There's no cuts hardly in the action. Like it shows you the entire process of him subduing her with the broomstick, and then like it's silence, you just hear country music playing a little bit in the background, which I like. And he ties up her, you could see him tie up her hands, whatever, haul her to the truck where it has those cool shots that you mentioned, and then put her in the truck, get in the truck, start it, like drive to the house, and he's just like poking her and like smiling, but then saying nice things every once in a while, like, "Oh, don't you worry, you know, or oh, you're just fine, just wait a little while," like just saying nice things, and then like laughing and poking her. It's I love it.
Yeah.
And something I realize is you don't see that very much in movies or horror movies. Is like, you know, horror movies with like psychopaths in it. Usually the psychopath is like really cold and emotionless. And you don't ever get to see psychopaths actually just having fun torturing, like just getting like glee, like just getting joy out of torturing someone. Like, I don't know. I just thought of that. Like you don't see that much in movies with serial killers or like psychopaths. Mostly it's like just they're stone faced, you know, and whatever, like they're emotionless, and that's what's scary. But this movie, it's like they're scary because he literally is having fun. And he's having so much fun with it. I'll stop my rant. That's enough.
Oh no, yeah. And like one thing, that scene, that whole sequence actually made me feel gross. Like I felt like it was totally gross. And like I was feeling so like disgusted that this guy, like the way he was hitting her with the broom, because it was like not really hitting her, but it felt like, and like now that you've kind of told me about, you know, the extents of which this director, you know, was doing some of these sequences, like I'm starting to think like the reason why he was hitting her not as hard as he physically could was because he was probably actually hitting her. But like all that stuff like felt like so gross, and like he's laughing, you know, driving down the truck, and I'm like, oh, this dude's fucked up, man, like this is bad, you know, like. And then I started to get worried, like if there was going to be like a rape sequence, or like how far this was going to go, like if this was going to go straight into, you know, torture porn kind of level stuff, because she was the last one. I was like, are they going to, you know, whatever to her, like just go like more into the gory field, which luckily they didn't. But yeah, so after this, they get captured, the dinner sequence, and then she escapes after the hammer sequence, which was so dumb. Like that is so like let grandpa do it.
I
let
love
grandpa
that.
do it. And they're all just screaming. Like you can't even hear what anyone's saying. They're all screaming about different things. And like, yeah, grandpa.
Hit her, grandpa.
Yeah. Hit her, grandpa.
You're the best, grandpa. I heard one of them say that. I was like, oh, that's great.
God.
It's so like wholesome. Just a wholesome family.
And then the grandpa's hand is just, you know, like cupped to hold the hammer. They put it in, it falls out. Put it in, falls out. Like, and then I like how that performer or the director chose for the grandpa to not move at all. Like he's just not even trying. Like it's not even there. And they're like, yeah. But yeah, so she escapes, breaks through another window, and we get the finale, which is the only part of this film that was spoiled to me, because I think this is one of the huge like legendary sequences or scenes or images is the final scene. But I hadn't seen everything leading up to it. So she runs into the highway, and there's an 18-wheeler. And I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, this is a whole different movie. Like, I thought there was supposed to just be a truck. So I was going to ask you, what did you think about, you know, the 18-wheeler, that guy coming out, them running around the 18-wheeler, and then he, I guess, leaves, and then a truck comes up, and then she goes into that truck, leaves. And I'm thinking, what about the 18-wheeler guy? Like, that's
what I thought too. What happened to him? I love that. He just, it was kind of weird. Like he gets out as if to help her, but then he runs back into his truck, and then, or she runs in, or does he push her in? I don't even remember. And then they just go out the other side of the truck, and then he just runs away. Like he's just running away, and that's the last we see of him. But that, it's really funny. It's like, what happened to him exactly? Because she got away in the truck, and Leatherface is still there, I guess. I mean, Leatherface has his little temper tantrum, but I wonder if he turned around and just started chasing after the other guy. That other guy got away safely. Who knows? It's a little mystery.
Oh my god. Yeah. I thought that kind of broke a little bit of the reality for me, because I was like, why wouldn't you have just took off in the truck? Like, I get 18-wheelers are slow to start up, but you know, I think there's a part where it shows Leatherface with a chainsaw stabbing at the door, and it doesn't break through. So I think you would have lasted a good bit. Like once you got it running, like I don't know, I would have
That's what
gone with my chances in the truck. But then also the other truck when it pulls up, I was like, wait, oh, this is like the busiest day of the road right now. Like you got two random people running into this situation.
That's
Oh my
true.
god. But I was going to ask you about that final sequence. You kind of noted on it, with Leatherface dancing around with the chainsaw. I honestly, like, with the context of the whole film, this is probably like one of, in my opinion, this is going to be blasphemy for anyone that hears this. It's kind of one of the like lower end shots, in my opinion. Like, it's so weird that this is the shot that has become like the legend status of all the shots in this film. But for me, I don't know. I loved the reverse shot of her in the truck and her driving off with the like open back, her hair flying in the wind, and then just the perfect sunset, or I guess it's dawn, is what they're portraying. Yeah. Like that, her perspective is absolutely beautiful. I love that shot. But the framing of the reverse of him, swinging the chainsaw, I didn't really like it, and I didn't really feel anything. So I was gonna ask you, like, why do you think that is such a staple in horror imagery?
I don't know. Maybe because it's the very last thing we see, and then it just cuts. So it's kind of memorable. But also, I don't know. I really like that shot because it's weird. It's like I guess it's just the way he moves around. It's like a dance. It feels like he's dancing with the chainsaw, which is cool, and it's just got the sound of the chainsaw and him making noises and it feels like the climax of the movie. Like it feels like the whole movie's like built up to this like outburst of his because they didn't get her. So he's like really frustrated and he's just like letting it all out. And then just the sun, the colors and like the sun flare in the back and the camera spinning around. I don't know. Yeah, it's just all together for some reason. It just kind of like builds up to this feeling of like this weird feeling like, whoa. This is weird. Yeah. I don't know how to describe it. It's one of those things. It's hard to put into words. But I like it.
That's awesome. Like technically I totally agree and see where you're coming at. That is very fast. You know what that scene, and this is probably not a positive thing either, but that scene immediately made me remember and think of the Joker sequence when he's in the bathroom dancing. And I was like, so the Joker totally like ripped this off because it was giving me the same vibes of like, the emotive dancing and twirling and stuff.
That is a weird connection, but yeah, it is very...
I think that is all the points I had. Did you have any other notes or mentionings that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, we didn't really mention like just the extent that the crew went to making that house look insane on the inside. Like, just the amount, and there's that one scene where they really show it off, like when the girl goes in there. I think the one that gets put on hook, I guess, or maybe it's the other girl. And it's just like, it's so long. It's like it feels like 2 minutes where she's just looking around and there's just different shots of little things made out of bones, and it's just cool how much work they put into all those little things. And you could tell that they were really proud of it and wanted to show off all their little creations. So that's another cool aspect of the movie that we didn't talk about, just the sets. I like the chair that is an armchair and it literally has arms on the arms of the chair. It's kind of funny.
But yeah, I was going to add on to that. Yeah, that sequence, the way it plays out is, again, one of the like amazing composed sequences of this movie. Is like we're so tight with her as she falls onto the floor, bunch of feathers, and you're like, oh, there's just a bunch of feathers. And then it's an extreme close-up to the chicken, I think that's in a cage, like suspended through whatever means. And then we see close-ups of like the armchair. We see close-ups of bones, of skeletons, of other, whatever. And it's like continually just showing us more very, closed off, close-up images of the room, and then we're hit like with a hammer to the face with the huge wide shot showing the entire space and the entire room, and you're like, oh, this is fucked up. Like, this room is just jam-packed with just bones and just like, what is going on in here? And I love that. I guess it was the rollout of that sequence was so cool. Like, I can't even think of another horror movie that unveiled a space that effectively and that well. I think, man, I don't know. I'm starting to think like I should probably bump this thing up to a 7 now that we're talking about.
Yeah.
a lot of the good stuff, but
Might as well. Yeah.
yeah.
Did you notice or find it funny? Like, did it stick out to you like it did to me this time watching it? That like it's just funny that the all of the characters went to the house voluntarily. Like
Oh, yeah.
none of them were chased there. Like all of them,
Hmm.
every single one of them just walked in the house or ran to the house thinking it was safe. I
Yeah.
just thought that was cool. Like that these bad guys are like the luckiest bad guys ever. Like I don't know. I think obviously it's implied that they had a bunch of other victims, but I wonder if it's like, did they get all the other victims this way that they just wandered here, or did they go out and kill them, or what? Because another thing I noticed this time is when they're approaching the house in the backyard, there's a bunch of cars underneath, like hidden underneath a sort of like camouflage, uh, like tarp or something that's over them, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is like all the other cars of all the victims, all their past victims. But I'm just thinking, yeah, like I wonder how they got all their other victims if it was this easy that they all
Oh,
just
yeah.
wandered right up to the house. I thought that was funny.
Yeah. That is something I was totally struggling with. I was like, oh, this is kind of like I was expecting them or Leatherface to go out doing the hunt, but yeah, like they all just voluntarily walk up to the house, and then that made me start thinking like, all right, so it just like a bad luck situation that they ran out of gas and then they ventured into the space, or was it planned where
Oh
a
yeah,
certain radius of gas stations were not around, so like you would always run out of gas here, and then there was that gas station where that old guy was, and then he would tell you, "Oh, I don't have any gas," and then you would run out in that radius, and maybe that's why the hitchhiker brother is out patrolling the streets to see when
maybe.
some, and he would maybe bring people back or walk them back, or I guess he was trying to get them to take him to his house, so maybe that was the initiating
Yeah,
event that they always planned on, and this time they dumped them off or whatever, and then they just got there on their own. But yeah, that is an interesting element. And then I guess one other final thing I just remembered is I liked how the father character was just like beating his two sons with a stick. Like it was very pathetic and like and like it was like very diminishing and like almost like a funny, like I don't know, it was so weird that I liked the choice. It was just so weird. I was like, and especially
I,
when he started beating Leatherface, and I'm like, dude, like I've
yeah,
seen what Leatherface can do to a person. Like
right.
what?
That's what
So
was, yeah, it was a cool moment. Like it's like that's what made me think like, oh yeah, he's Leatherface is just like a victim. He's just like
yeah,
a child, and he sounds like the sounds he made. He's like a little child to this
yeah,
guy. So that's so cool. There's like a hierarchy of these
hmm,
crazy people, the psychopaths. Oh, and then I love when he walks in the house after Leatherface chainsawed the door, and he's just like, "Look
oh
what your
yeah.
brother did to the door." That's just funny. Good moment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That sequence of him chainsawing the door made no sense because he could have just chainsawed around where the lock was, and he's over
Yeah.
there cutting like a V and an X, and then I was like, oh my god.
He's not the brightest, but
Yeah.
he gets the job
Ah,
done.
one other thing, I do love how there's that part where he falls in the woods or trips or whatever, and the chainsaw falls on his thigh and starts cutting
Oh yeah.
himself. So I do love that because I was waiting for that to happen. I was like, it is not practical to run with a chainsaw. Like I don't get it. Like
Right.
that that just sounds like a
Yeah.
recipe for failure. So I do like how he at least got injured a little bit from that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's very unrealistic that that would not happen eventually.
So I guess the final question here is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Cineverm canon.
Well, it's in my canon, so
Okay,
yeah,
your
I don't
personal
know.
canon.
I don't know if it's going to end up in the Cineverm canon, but it's definitely, I would say yes
Some
because of
awesome.
its, yeah, because of, yeah,
Yeah, I think I'd vote no.
yeah,
Oh my god! But
that's okay.
I do know.
What,
I think. Go ahead.
like, what would you put in your horror canon? Like, I'm curious if you have any
Ah,
that you would put in the canon for horror that you've
uh,
seen.
it probably just It Follows. I
It
think is the
follows?
yeah. It
Yeah.
Follows is the only. Yeah, that's probably the only horror canon in my because it hits all the elements. Like it has the visual aesthetic, it has the sound, it has a beautiful score, it has the horror trope element, and then it has that element that's wrapped up in with a message or an idea with the STD fear, like how you were talking about, this movie for you, or the other types of horror movies that you brought up, where like the horror is used to talk about either a political or social, emotional, or societal problem. Like I feel like it follows really, like it's a very simple idea, like the STD. It was such a perfect metaphor that the whole film used as a vehicle. And yeah, it just doesn't have any flaws in my opinion. Like it's to the point, it's clean, it's weird, and it's just shot so well. Like it's probably like one of my favorite A24 movies. So that's
It's
probably
an
the only one
A24.
I can
forgot
think
about
of.
that.
Yeah, it was like one of their
That's
early
weird.
ones. I'm trying to think of another
Yeah.
horror movie. I'm sure there's another. I mean, Midsommar and Hereditary would have been in there, but they've gone down because of their flaws. Like honestly,
I'm
I
trying.
think this
I always,
if this movie would have nailed, the first 30 minutes a little better with the characters and had more realistic kind of situation going on. And then I think if it was a little longer, like it almost felt too short to me. Like I wish we would have got more time with the Leatherface people and with the kills. Like I do like how it is very blunt, but I don't know. There's a part of me that wishes I could have had more time to investigate and like be in this scenario, because like with the film that gets better as it continues and then it ends, it almost feels like, oh, but I want more of that end part, you know? So that for me is like the last 30 minutes of this movie is so perfect, but the first half just was just so slow and trudgy for me.
Yeah, I love to add, like, I loved every episode that we do one of these. I update in my head my predictions of which movie you're gonna like the best that we still have on our roster, or which ones you're not gonna like.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, what is it? Are any of these gonna be the one that hits Anthony's just hits all his buttons? Like The Exorcist is, for some reason, is the closest one I can think of that maybe will hit all of those things for you, because it's definitely about something, and it has a lot of emotion and a lot of character. So I'm like, okay, maybe that one, but we'll see.
That's the thing that I'm so confused by in this genre. And like this is so strange, but I feel like most filmmakers that I've met in Alabama, like indie filmmakers who want to become filmmakers or who are working in the business, they all love horror. And I think horror is just a huge staple of how a lot of filmmakers enter into the industry. So like, but I feel like I don't know. I don't know why like so much horror is weak on the character, emotion, story, and message part. Like I do see the message in this film with the vegetarianism and the other elements that we talked about, but I don't think it hit, like I don't think the center of that movie is like, they don't tie the horror in that perfectly, like I think It Follows does, or some other movies that we will see later in the future. And I just like wonder why that isn't a central concern. Like I always see people get way too excited about the gore and the kills and the nudity or the tenacity of whatever you're exposing or showing on screen, like not uncensored, but that feeling of like, ooh, this is dangerous that we're showing or shooting this. But I've always wondered why like the narrative isn't dead center in these things, because I feel like horror is like one of the best perfect genres to dig into the psyche of humanity and fears. Like fear is such a central component of like the human existence. So I was gonna ask you, like, do you feel that, or is it just me? Like maybe my perspective's a little warped. Like, do you feel like horror is a great genre?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think like the best response. Maybe I was thinking that it's because horror is a lot of it is, oh my God, what's the word? It's all subconscious. Like all of horror is subconscious. Like it's instinctive, like it's subconscious. It's not on the like conscious logical level. It's all on the subconscious, reptile part of our brain level. So that's why plot and character and all that is not an important thing in the horror genre. Like it's just because that's not what the purpose of a horror movie is. It's more to like dig into that part of your brain where you can't really logically explain why it has an effect on you. So I don't know. But then obviously there's that element of because fear is like the easiest emotion to like bring out in someone. That's why there's so many filmmakers like use horror as a start, because it's easier to make people like afraid of a jump scare or whatever, than to do than to like cause any other emotion in them. So that's the easier thing to do. But I still think, I was thinking the other night that like if you took all the horror movies out of film, that it would take a lot like out of just cinema. Like I think I'm seriously, I was thinking the other night that is the most important genre in film, because if you just removed all the horror movies, it would just be, film would be like no different than like theater, or I don't know how to describe it, but like it's because film is all about like the sensational aspect. Like, so like horror just, it would be so empty without all the horror movies. I don't know.
You just,
But,
you just blew. I mean, I'm sure there's theater plays that play with horror, but I mean, it's like this medium is almost, it almost feels like designed for horror. Like if you think about like what Hitchcock did with thrillers back in the day, and then the slasher movies and horror nowadays, like it is such a primal thing. Like when you sit down and watch a movie, if you really like focus on it, you can actually feel like terrified. Like I think you could get more terrified in watching a movie than a book, maybe. I don't know. I've never really read. I haven't really read a lot of horror books, but just the medium with the sound, the visuals, and the editing, the warping of time while you're watching it. You can really like smash cut to just infinite amount of disgusting imagery, and you would feel horrible. So it's almost like cinema is very, very. It works very well with horror. Maybe I just need to get over it.
One of the first. I'm pretty sure one of the first films ever. Like Thomas Edison, I think, made it, if I'm not like mistaken, like was literally just like a shot, like a shot of a train coming towards the camera, and that's it. Like it was said that was like one of the first films, just to induce horror, like in the audience, and they were like really apparently were very, very, very affected by that. It's just cool how that's such an early, and there's a lot of like early films that were horror, and that was like the beginning of film. It's cool. It's cool that it's such a big part of cinema, but we got to find that one that just hits you.
I need to find.
I'm searching for it.
But I totally agree with your statement now. Because like I'm like the innovation that has happened in horror is like just absolutely fundamental. Like everything Hitchcock did, everything, like there's things in this
special
movie.
Effects.
Yes, special effects, the way it cuts, like smash zooms, or the way it's playing with framing, like all that is to accentuate an emotion, and like horror is the titular example of that. Like you have to use and you have to push boundaries to create, the fear in people. So
something that's unexpected. That's hard.
Well, I think that is a great way to close this review out. So that is going to conclude our thank you for listening to this episode of Cineverm. We would be grateful and humbled if you could leave us a review or rating with your thoughts or comments on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you could share us with your friends or family, as that really helps us in our journey to spread the love of cinema. And we will see you next week.
See you.
Cineverm.